How long have you been ordained?
So I was ordained as a deacon in 2018 and as a priest in 2019. I definitely felt a calling later in life. I was a lay person and a lay woman, lay leader in the Episcopal Church for many years, and a social worker and a professor of social work. So I lived out my life in lay ministry. Um, and I think that's what was, it's one of the things that's interesting to me when I've watched the Philadelphia 11 movie. I don't think it really occurred to me that even lay women weren't given a voice as deputies to General Convention until 1970. So all of this is happening. We're talking about the anniversary of ordination of women to the priesthood, but even the legitimized involvement of women in the councils of the church as lay women or clergy women, wasn't even something. And it just in my same lifetime, the same year I was born is the same year that women get voice of any kind in the church, and that's really profound. So for me, I felt a call when the church needed me, is how I think about it. I was someone who does a lot of work with vocational discernment and vocational training of social workers, had my whole career. I didn't really know what God had in mind for me, and yet there was definitely time and place for me to be helping people discern their gifts as lay people, deacons, and priests. And so I heard that call, I think, when I was meant to hear that call, and I was doing the good work of all the baptized up until that time.
So, 50 years, did you say it was the year you were born?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So what's the significance?
Well, that women were seated. So I was born in 1970, and women were seated for the first time at General Convention as deputies in 1970. Wow. This is all within the time that I remember being alive. I remember the events that were unfolding when I was younger. I know I became an Episcopalian as a young adult. I wasn't raised in the Episcopal Church, but I was in college and training to be a social worker and started attending an Episcopal church. I didn't see women in ordained ministry. I saw women as deacons first in ordained ministry in the 90s. It wasn't until much later, after I had moved to Richmond in 2000, where I encountered the first woman priest who was in my serving community. So I think it's significant because when something happens, it takes a requisite amount of time for something that's new to become something that is normalized, for something that is new to the church and the church catching up to God's call on the lives of women to serve as ordained clergy. It took some time for the church to catch up with that, and then for people to know that they could discern their call and to walk through all the canonical processes and get all the permissions required to actually pursue that call. So I think it's taken 50 years for us to feel like we're almost and yet not quite at equal numbers of gender in terms of the composition of clergy in the Episcopal Church. For me, there's still a visible recognition of I'm doing something different. And I know that after 50 years, it would seem like that has evened out, or maybe it's more normative, but I don't feel that way. I recognize almost on a weekly basis, at least once a week, I would say, someone is surprised to see me in a collar. Someone will ask me what I do or what I'm doing, sometimes in a not very pleasant way, and sometimes in a surprised and delighted sort of way. And that means that it's important. It means that it's still, even 50 years later, part of the call of every woman who is ordained to be representing Christ and the church just by our very nature of being.